The story begins on a snowy battlefield where a man stands over a mountain of fallen foes. He then turns around and finds a black-haired young man he calls Ash, looking quite surprised. The older man then questions why the other is there, as he was supposed to be on a subjugation mission. With a wounded face and a serious look, the dark-haired young man simply replies that he came to take him down. Hearing the threat, the blonde man keeps his expression calm and doesn't seem to care about the situation at all. The young man then accuses the older man of planning to use everyone and then discard them when they were no longer useful. His eyes burn with anger as he calls him father, confirming the two are related. However, the older man coldly replies that this is the purpose of someone, Quingless, and calls him a foolish son. And so we discover the name of our protagonist, Aster A. Elmheim, a young man determined to change his destiny. Next, we see the crest of House Elmheim, a noble family known for its immense power. As the greatest martial house on the continent, they have sworn to protect the royal family, and their leader is Lord Roderick. He is the sole possessor of the 7 wings in the kingdom and once saved young Aster from a blizzard on a whim. To repay this debt, the boy then did everything his father asked without ever questioning his orders. However, his life was not easy, and he was always looked down upon, as we see in his memory with a broken wooden sword. The other boys constantly humiliated him, telling him not to get cocky just for being there. The wing crest on his back was proof of magical power, but he was the only one in the house unable to use magic. Because of this, his own brothers cruelly nicknamed him Wingless to put him down. Despite all the scorn, the boy never gave up and continued to train tirelessly with his sword. The young man pushed himself to the limit, doing push-ups in the rain and dedicating himself to becoming stronger than everyone. He did all of this because he believed that one day, all his devotion would finally be rewarded. Going back to the past, we see the protagonist in a snowy forest with his companions. Suddenly, the young man hides behind a tree when he notices something strange approaching. Then he is shocked to see that his group has been surrounded and wonders if it's an ambush. Returning to the present, the boy questions his father about his loyalty being betrayed in such a way, but the Lord scorns him, saying that a tool shouldn't have expectations, and that his role is over. The young man's expression fills with hatred and resentment upon hearing his father's cruel words. With that, he charges forward with his sword, ready to attack the man who betrayed him without a second thought. The young man yells that he was a fool for believing in someone like him all this time. At that moment, he unleashes a powerful blow, calling himself a pathetic idiot for his naivety. However, the Lord is barely fazed by the attack and only receives a small cut on his face. Suddenly, 2 men appear and restrain the protagonist with chains of magical energy. They are his brothers, who attack him without mercy with their red, glowing swords. The black-haired young man cries out in pain as he is immobilized and wounded by the cowardly attacks. One of the brothers mocks him on the ground, saying that a wingless person will always be wingless. The 3 stand before the defeated young man, while one of them says that groveling suits him. Lying in the snow, he asks why his father took him in if he planned to discard him in the end. The Lord then kneels and tells the boy not to delude himself, as he was never of any use. He then grabs the young man's hair, forcing him to look up with a scornful gaze. The man reveals that he only needed the power of the 7 wings that dwelled within the boy. With a face full of surprise, the protagonist doesn't understand what the 7 wings are. The Lord then reveals that the boy's mother was very useful for his dark and selfish plans. He explains that she carried the seed that would serve his purposes to obtain more power. Desperate, the young man reaches out his hand in the snow, trying to stop him from leaving, but to no avail. Filled with hatred, he screams in his thoughts, demanding that Roderick answer his questions. But the only thing the boy feels is the cold snow touching his nearly frozen hand. With a lost and hopeless gaze, he wonders if this is the end of his journey. At that, he questions the purpose of his life and what all his suffering was for. Suddenly, everything turns white and warm, and he wonders if he's in the afterlife upon seeing snow. He is in someone's arms, looking confused and not understanding the situation at all. With wide eyes, the boy realizes this is not a dream, but reality. The little one wonders where he is as he continues to lie in the cold, unprotected snow. Then he looks at his small body and realizes that something is very strange about him. He lifts his little hand and questions if that body really belongs to him. The boy then understands that it's not just a small body, but the body of a baby. Looking at the woman holding him, he notices that she is lifeless in his arms. Suddenly, he hears voices and sees a golden glint in someone's eyes giving orders. Some men on horseback are desperately searching for the woman in the middle of the blizzard. The group's leader orders them to retrieve the baby she supposedly took for Roderick. Upon hearing the name, the baby is shocked and starts connecting the dots of what is happening. He understands that Roderick was looking for a baby, and that he is that baby. He questions if that baby floating in the air is really him. The boy remembers being found in a blizzard and understands that he has gone back to the past. Golden lights shine around him as his perception of reality completely changes. Finding it all ridiculous, he decides he needs to confirm the situation later. The little one knows that if he stays there, he will end up in the Duke's hands again. With determination, he begins to crawl away from the lifeless woman. A golden energy envelopes him, and he thinks that he needs to escape as quickly as possible. His small hand glows brightly as he pushes himself through the icy snow. Suddenly, he's out of breath and grunts in frustration for not being able to breathe properly. The effort makes his limbs feel like they're on fire, and he leaves a trail in the snow. Despite a life of groveling, the boy vows to himself that he will survive. An image of his tragic future appears in his mind, with his hand extended towards Roderick. With a look of pure rage, the little one vows that he will get his revenge on Roderick. Even as just a baby, he continues to crawl through the vast, cold whiteness. Exhausted, the boy finally passes out upon finding someone's feet in his path. A little white-haired girl calls out to her father upon finding the baby lying on the ground. Then a gray-haired man appears. He is the Viscount of House Highfried. He picks up the boy and wonders what a baby would be doing in a place like that, cradled in the man's arms. The little one seems to finally find some peace. The Viscount's eyes widen in surprise, as he never expected to find a child there. Holding the little one in his arms, the Viscount is intrigued and wonders who this child could be. He then notices the long trail in the snow and is shocked by the distance the baby traveled alone. Meanwhile, the little boy just sleeps peacefully with a very serene expression on his face. In a dark place, the boy wonders where is as he sees the image of another child. At that, the red-haired baby seems to come to welcome him amidst several golden feathers in the air. Suddenly, he wakes up startled in a crib, thinking about not using something he saw in his dream. Then the little one sees 4 children staring at him, and one of them tells him not to be so naughty. Completely confused, the boy doesn't understand the situation at all, as he is surrounded by the other children. One of the girls holds him, but the black-haired boy struggles, trying to get free. With a leap, he manages to escape from her arms, leaving the other children quite surprised. Immediately, the boy starts crawling away with a desperate look on his face. One of the little girls is shocked by the little one's behavior and yells for him to stop, but he doesn't listen and continues his escape, wondering why he's being chased. Desperate, the protagonist extends his hand, and a golden energy begins to emanate from his body. His eyes glow intensely with the same golden color as his newly awakened magical aura. Suddenly, he starts to float and is shocked to realize that this is real magic. Surprised by his own power, the boy continues to float, not understanding what is happening. Then the magic fails, and he begins to fall at high speed with no control over the situation. With a face full of panic, the little one braces for impact as he continues his fall. Fortunately, the Viscount appears and catches him, finding the boy very mysterious. The protagonist's eyes widen in surprise as he recognizes the man who saved him. He then remembers that this is Highfried, the Viscount of Lodrick's domain, his father's land. Looking at the mansion, the boy wonders if this is another house of the Elmheim family. Then we see a portrait of Highfried mu Elmheim the head of the Viscount's family and a branch of the main house. He and his brother Logic were known as the Two Wings, and together they protected the royal family. But the boy remembers that the Viscount met his end in a civil war, along with his entire family. With this information, he finally confirms that he has truly gone back in time, and this is his second chance. However, he despairs at the thought that he fled the Duke's house, only to be caught by his brother. A woman holds him and wonders if the boy's magic went out of control and made him fly through the air. She then smiles gently at the little one, seeming happy to finally have him around. With a warm hug, the woman calms him down, saying he doesn't need to be afraid of anything anymore. The boy is speechless at the kind gesture of the woman, who continues to treat him with great love. Meanwhile, the Viscount observes the two with a calm and thoughtful expression on his face. At that, the older man extends his hand and states that this child possesses tremendous power. To prove his point, he lifts the baby's shirt, revealing a crest as proof of his words. Through the mirror's reflection, we see the man and woman shocked as they recognize the symbol of the 7 wings. The boy becomes desperate upon seeing the mark on his body and wonders why it is there. His eyes glow an intense gold as shock completely takes over his mind. He then remembers Roderick's words, who said he needed the power of the 7 wings that he possessed. A memory of his father holding him in a cold and calculating way flashes through his mind at that moment. The boy finally understands that he was taken in only to have his 7 wings taken in the future. Angrily, the boy questions how Roderick dares to call him wingless after taking his own. The woman is confused by the sudden change in the little one's expression in her arms. The woman then asks the Viscount what he intends to do with the child in her arms. Hearing the question, the little one thinks the situation is bad and he needs to act quickly. He knows his power cannot fall into the hands of the Elmheim family, as he needs it for his revenge. To the boy's surprise, the older man simply says that they will adopt him. This unexpected decision leaves the protagonist completely speechless and without any reaction. With a gentle gesture, the Viscount reaches out to pat the boy's head. Then he says that the boy is still a fledgling who cannot fly on his own and needs help. The older man promises to take care of him and assume responsibility until the day he can fly. The little one's eyes widen upon hearing the man's kind and affectionate words. Suddenly, one of the little girls falls to the floor after hearing the conversation from behind the room's door. The Viscount realizes that all the children were eavesdropping on the conversation the whole time. One of them then admits that they were worried about the new baby in the house. Gathered as a family, the children approach their mother, who is holding the newest family member. The woman smiles at the little one, while another of her daughters approaches, curious to see him. With a calm smile, the new mother looks at the baby in her arms with much love and affection. At that, she lifts him up and calls him Aster, the name of a new star that was born in their family. Then 10 years pass, and we see the grand mansion of the Viscount's family on a sunny day. Lord Hyfred, now older, is greeted by one of his subordinates at the entrance of his home. In the reflection of a picture frame, we see a young man cleaning the glass with a cloth in his hand. Next, a grown-up and confident Aster steps out of a carriage with his sword at his waist. The young man helps a red-haired young woman out of the carriage, calling her sister Alphen. The young woman thanks him for the kind gesture, and we remember she was one of the babies who welcomed him. The two walk together with serious expressions, and he seems very focused on his goal. They are on their way to the sword dance assembly, a very important event for the nobles. This annual event is organized by a ducal family and brings together all the noble martial arts houses. It's a place where each family showcases its strength and also tests its best swordsmen in combat. The two siblings then join a crowd of other young nobles awaiting the start of the event. People begin to gossip about the Viscount's family and the adopted boy of unknown origin. With malicious eyes, they wonder how much the Viscount's family plans to tarnish the Elmheim name. One of the nobles then points to the protagonist's back, identifying him as the adopted boy. His sister notices the stares and tells the young man not to worry about the malicious comments. With a clenched fist, she states that in this place, the weak are always crushed without any mercy. The two stand side by side with determined looks, ready for whatever comes their way. Their father then explains that this is the Viscount family's current, standing among the nobles. The Viscount continues, saying he wanted to show this harsh reality to his adopted son. With a serious look, the older man then asks if the young man is disappointed with the situation, but with a confident smile and shining eyes, the young man says he doesn't care about their coldness. The boy's father laughs, relieved by his son's answer, looking quite proud of him. In his past life, Astor's social debut was marked by a humiliating defeat in an arena. That place held bitter memories, but now with his 7 wings back, everything would be different. With his golden eyes shining brightly, he vows that this time he won't be humiliated by anyone. Then, the 3 of them walk towards the grand hall of the event, ready for what's to come. From one of the windows, 2 young nobles watch the arrival of the Viscount's family with disdainful looks. The black-haired young man feels the malicious stares but doesn't let them bother him. With firm steps, they continue on their way into the hall, ready to make their debut. With a confident smile, he tells himself that he will have a glorious social debut this time. In an era where knights reigned, strength was the most important thing for nobles. At that, we see a light-haired young man fighting with his sword during one of the event's duels. For nobles, power was measured by their mastery with the sword and their skill in combat. The fights in the arena were considered the pinnacle of swordsmanship and a test for the best warriors. Majesty in combat was a noble's way of showing their renown and their family's power. As the 2 fight in the arena, the crowd watches every move with great attention. Suddenly, the 2 swordsmen charge at each other in a swift and decisive attack, but the absolute symbol of power and majesty was the medal, something that few truly possessed. With a precise blow, the light-haired young man manages to disarm and defeat his opponent in the arena. The red-haired young man is in shock after being defeated so humiliatingly in front of everyone. The victor then raises his sword, displaying the symbol that represented strength and majesty. The shining mark on his hand was the medal, proof of his power and honor as a knight. Watching from a box, the Viscount's family comments that the place remains as oppressive as ever. One of the girls then says that now she understands why her other sisters didn't want to come to the festival. The protagonist remembers his past life and the bullies who humiliated him in that place. The memory of his crushing defeat at that same event comes rushing back to his mind. His sister notices the change in his expression and calls his name, looking worried about him. She then asks if the young man is nervous because it's his first sword dance festival, but he denies it and says he doesn't feel nostalgia, but rather finds it all detestable. The red-haired girl is completely confused by her brother's unexpected response. The Viscount then says he needs to go to a meeting and asks his son to look after his sister. The girl complains, saying she's older, but the young man teases her, saying she's clumsy. The older man then advises the young man to use the time to make new connections with others. But before leaving, he warns him to make sure no one finds out about the 7 wings. After his father leaves, the boy thinks that hiding his power will be easier said than done. Suddenly, he feels the hostile stares of all the other nobles in the hall directed at him. With a sigh, the protagonist thinks about how difficult it is to socialize in such a hostile atmosphere. Despite the hostility, a look of determination appears in his bright, golden eyes. His sister sees him walking away and asks where he's going in such a hurry. Confidently, the young man just replies that he's going to make some friends around here. He then approaches a group of young nobles who are relaxing on a sofa in the hall. One of the red-haired boys notices him and rudely asks who the heck he is. Unfazed, the protagonist introduces himself and calls him Brother Dallas in a very calm tone. He then reveals his full name as Astor F. Elheim and says he is his younger brother. The red-haired boy is surprised, and the young man explains that he saw him from afar and came to say hi. Another noble then explains to Dallas that this is the boy adopted by the Viscount's family. With a hateful look, Dallas says that's why the other has the audacity to use the F in his name. The protagonist then remembers that Dallas and Brian are the ones who betrayed him in his past life. With this memory, he finds it pathetic that he once found the two of them intimidating. Now, in his eyes, they just look like children playing dress, up on a brightly lit stage. His sister then calls his name, trying to pull him out of his dark and heavy thoughts. She then pulls him by the arm and tells them to leave, as he had already said his hello. Suddenly, the red-haired boy calls her by name, and she tenses up at being noticed by him. With a mocking smile, he asks if the girl is still hiding behind her father. He then invites her to join them, saying it's an order from the family's main house. But the young woman refuses and states that there is no master-servant relationship between the families. The protagonist stops her from leaving by holding her arm and asking her to wait a moment. With a firm hand on her wrist, he says that he's not finished talking with the others there. The black-haired young man then turns to the group with a serious and determined expression on his face. With a wicked look, the redhead asks if the boy knows something they don't. At that, he insults the girl's father, saying he was a knight who couldn't even protect the king. The noble continues, saying the man took the blame and had his arm removed by his own brother. He then finishes by saying he's glad he doesn't have a loser's blood in his veins. Angrily, the red-haired young woman yells at him to take back what he said about her father right now. Without a second thought, she throws her drink in his face and says she won't allow the insult. The young man insults her and says her father must be very disappointed to have a daughter like her. With a hateful look, he warns her that this isn't a ballroom and she should behave herself. The noble humiliates her and tells her to wear rags next time so she won't mind getting wet. Suddenly, the protagonist approaches and says he was worried before arriving at the venue. He then reveals that he was afraid he wouldn't feel any anger even after seeing their faces again. With a determined look, he then coldly grabs a bottle from one of the nobles beside him. He looks at his sister and says that it's actually a relief to be there again to face them. At that, the young man tosses the bottle into the air and gets Dallas's attention with a provocative tone. The red-haired noble barely has time to react as the bottle falls quickly towards him, but with a swift move, he cuts the bottle in mid-air and says it's good to see them again. The noble is completely soaked with the drink and shocked by the young man's actions. With his sword in hand, he faces his adopted brother while the other desperately calls out to him. The young man then tastes the drink on his finger and realizes it was just grape juice. With a wicked smile, he says the drink is a perfect match for a spoiled noble like him. We go back 3 years in the past, where a voice asks the young man to hold on during a fight. One of his sisters cries desperately and asks if he's trying to hurt the others. The golden energy seems to go out of control and scares the little girls who are with him at that moment. The power of the 7 wings explodes dangerously, and he never imagined it would be so strong. The Viscount looks very concerned and wonders if that strength can truly be controlled. He then questions if the boy, and he himself, will be able to master that immense and dangerous power. Returning to the present, a guard runs into the Viscount's meeting room with bad news. The older man then asks what happened. As they are in the middle of a conference, the guard reveals that the children of the main family and the Elmheim branch are in a duel right now. Upon hearing the news, the 2 family leaders have very serious and tense expressions. Without a second thought, the Viscount gets up and rushes out of the room to see what happened. His daughter sees him and asks what happened that was so serious for him to be in such a hurry. One of the nobles from the main family smiles upon seeing the fight brewing between the young men. He then comments that a fight between brothers of the Elmheim house isn't something you see every day. The Duke and the Viscount observe the scene, and one of them thinks that depending on the outcome of the fight, other nobles also watch the situation with expressions of concern and curiosity on their faces. The Duke smiles wickedly and thinks that this festival could become quite chaotic soon. Hungrily, Dallas calls him a fool for picking a fight with the Duke's house like that. He then shows his 4-wing crest, proving that he's on a completely different level. With a scornful look, the redhead then demands that the protagonist show his own wing crest. The redhead then mocks the protagonist, asking if he's ashamed to show his crest. With a smug smile, the boy says that showing off with a simple pattern is embarrassing. Dallas is furious with the provocation and the audacity of the boy who challenges him without any fear. The young man then proposes that if he wins, Dallas will have to apologize to his sister. The redhead accepts the challenge, but says that if he wins, the other will become his dog forever. Without wasting time, Dallas charges with his sword, and the two begin an intense battle in the hall. The blades clash with force, and the protagonist manages to block the attack without much difficulty. The black-haired young man stands firm and focused as he holds his sword with great strength. Then Dallas uses the power of the 4-wing crest to strengthen his next blow with magic. A red aura envelopes his blade, and he unleashes a powerful attack against his opponent. Seeing the scene from afar, his sister screams his name, looking very worried about the outcome. Meanwhile, the Duke watches the fight with a smile and thinks that his son's swordsmanship is still immature, but he knows that the crest's magical power compensates for the lack of skill with the sword. He explains that the magic of one wing is like the flame of a small, very weak candle. Meanwhile, the magic contained in 4 wings is like an explosion of immense and destructive power. With a wicked smile, the redhead asks the boy where all his previous courage went. He then taunts him, asking if he didn't want to make him apologize for his words. Angrily, Dallas demands that the protagonist show his power and stop hiding on the defensive. The redhead then prepares a final blow with both hands to end the fight once and for all. One of the nobles smiles with satisfaction and says the match is already decided with that attack. A golden aura envelopes the protagonist's sword as he prepares for the final counterattack. With a swift move, he blocks Dallas's blow, and the two energies clash with force. The redhead is completely shocked, as he didn't expect his attack to be stopped so easily. With a confident smile, the black-haired young man tells the other that he talks too much. He then counterattacks with a kick and sends the noble flying with a single, precise blow. The young man stands in a firm posture, his golden aura shining intensely around him. He thinks that he waited 10 years to learn magic in the Viscount's house, just to get revenge. His eyes shine with determination as he prepares to continue the fight against Dallas. Without hesitation, the young man advances with a series of quick and powerful blows against his opponent. The redhead is unable to defend himself and ends up on his knees, completely overwhelmed. Another brother watches the scene, shocked, not believing that Dallas is being pushed back like that. At that, a green and yellow energy pushes the noble back with overwhelming force. Desperate, he yells that he is a 4-wing and cannot be defeated by someone like Aster. But the protagonist faces him with a cold stare, not caring about the other's power. He then unleashes another powerful blow that rushes towards the red-haired noble. The other nobles are surprised and wonder if the boy is really going to win the fight like that. Everyone is shocked and comments that there are still monsters like him in the Elheim family. With a focused look, the young man continues his attack without giving the other a chance to breathe. The Viscount watches the scene worriedly beside his daughter and says the situation is bad. With a face full of anger, Dallas tries to resist his opponent's overwhelming power. At that, a memory of the Viscount being gravely wounded by his brother flashes through the boy's mind. The man was laughing maniacally while his relative fell defeated, unable to do anything. With eyes glowing with rage, the protagonist releases an even more powerful golden aura. Desperate, Dallas screams for him to stop, but the young man's fury seems to have gone out of control. Seeing the scene, his family in the box shouts his name, trying to stop him from going too far. A large explosion of energy throws the red-haired noble back with great force. The Duke just watches the scene with his arms crossed, seeming not to care about his son. The protagonist then stops his attack and thrusts his sword into the ground right in front of his opponent. Lying on the ground, Dallas is terrified, and the young man tells him to come in rags next time. With a cold and superior look, the young man calls him cousin, showing all his contempt for him. He then turns and looks at his family in the box, who are watching him with astonishment. The young man declares that he is no longer the wingless Ash, showing that his old weakness is gone. With a confident smile, he thinks that realizing this has finally cleared his mind completely. Suddenly, the young man's eyes glow with a reddish hue as he senses a malevolent presence. He looks to the top of the stairs and sees a sinister figure with a dark, red aura. The protagonist is in shock as he realizes who the owner of that overwhelming and malevolent power is. The man stares down at the boy with a look of pure malice and contempt on his face. With a cold sweat on his face, the young man can't believe he's seeing his former father there in front of him. The nobles can't believe that the Viscount's youngest son defeated the main family's third son, but the Lord's arrival puts everyone in a bad situation, as he won't stay quiet about the humiliation. The protagonist feels the intimidating presence and turns to face the approaching man. Lying on the ground, Dallas laughs maniacally upon seeing that his father has finally arrived to save him. The young man then comes face to face with the leader of the Elheim family, the powerful Lord Roderick. The older man stares at him with a serious and furious look, seeming not at all happy with the situation. With a face full of hatred, the young man remembers the name of the one who betrayed him in his past life. The redhead then crawls to his father and grabs his leg, desperately asking for help. With tears in his eyes, Dallas calls him father, hoping he will defend him from the protagonist. He then points at the young man and accuses him of being the bastard who dared to challenge the family. The noble then begs his father to use his power and put the young man in his place. Suddenly, the Lord crushes his own son's hand on the floor with brutal and cold force. Dallas screams in pain and is shocked by the unexpected action of his father, who punished him without mercy. The other nobles are horrified by the scene and don't understand the man's cruelty towards his son. Even Dallas's brother is speechless upon seeing the redhead's hand being crushed like that. The Lord then humiliates him, asking why he's crying after dragging the family's name through the mud. Seeing the scene, the Viscount yells for his brother to stop the cruelty and not harm the boy. But he ignores him and tells the redhead that he has no right to hold a sword. A tense silence fills the hall as everyone watches the scene, shocked and speechless. The two brothers then face each other with looks full of hatred, ready for a direct confrontation. The black-haired young man steps forward and points his sword at the Lord, questioning him. He then says that his cousin has not yet apologized to Sister Alphen as promised. With a defiant look, the young man asks his uncle to wait on the punishment until after the apology. The older man scorns him and asks if he thinks he's an Elmheim just for being an orphan. But the boy replies that he is the Viscount's son and learned the pride of a knight from him. The Lord doesn't seem to care about the answer and just looks at his family in the box. He then accuses the young man of tarnishing the main family's reputation with his attitude. The Duke observes the scene and understands that the situation is much more serious than it seems. Another noble comments that this can't be resolved as a simple children's squabble. A light-haired young man smiles wickedly, seeming to enjoy all the chaos. One of the men then remembers that the boy's father gave an arm as the price for his disloyalty. The Lord then questions the young man about what he is prepared to sacrifice for his audacity. With all due respect, the young man prepares to give his answer without any fear in his eyes. He says that it wasn't a squabble, but a duel to answer insults with his sword. The older man gets angry upon hearing the boy's defiant words. The young man then uses the Lord's own words against him and says he won't give up anything. Seeing the scene, Alphen becomes very worried about her brother, who faces their uncle without backing down. The light-haired noble finds it amusing and comments that the boy is only 10 years old. The Lord's eye twitches with anger at the audacity of the young man before him. He then understands the situation and draws his sword, ready for a confrontation with the boy. He then orders the young man to take his fighting stance for the duel. The protagonist is shocked, as he didn't expect to be challenged by the Lord. Suddenly, The older man charges forward with absurd speed towards him. The Lord's blow shatters the floor, creating a huge crater with the impact. His sister watches the scene, terrified and unable to do anything to help. Desperate, the Viscount shouts his brother's name to try to stop him. At that, the boy's adoptive father jumps in to block the Lord's attack. The two swords clash with tremendous force in the middle of the hall. The two brothers then begin an intense and spark-filled battle. After the clash, the Viscount runs to see if his son is okay. Suddenly, a pillar of ice erupts from the floor, separating the two sides. The older man is confused and doesn't understand what just happened. Wounded, the protagonist gets up with difficulty but remains standing. His face is injured, but his eyes burn with pure determination. The Lord just watches the scene from afar with a look of contempt. He then turns and starts to walk out of the main hall. The Viscount rushes and catches the young man before he collapses to the floor. Exhausted, the older man calls his name, looking very concerned. With an injured face, the young man says he protected his sister and the promise. Moved, the Viscount praises him, saying he was magnificent in the fight. Roderick then turns and goes up the stairs without another word, with his son following right behind. Up there, one of the nobles comments that Duke resorted to a very childish move to resolve the situation. He says that if he let the boy win, the family's reputation would be in tatters, so it was a fair deal. Even facing the great lord, the young man stood firm and became a rising star there. The noble admits he was on the edge of his seat, afraid that House Elmheim would end up splitting in two. Then an older man says that an era of turmoil is approaching, with a storm that could divide the world. Meanwhile, the Viscount holds the wounded boy, and his sister runs desperately to help him in the hall. Sometime later, on a sunny day, we see several men training outside the mansion. Some knights watch the training with surprised expressions on their faces, looking impressed. At that, the protagonist trains with a wooden sword and manages to defeat his opponent without difficulty. One of the knights watching the fight is shocked by the young man's skill and says he's impressive. The black-haired young man remains focused on the training, and the man calls him young Master Astor. Another knight comments that he has a lot of skill and is frightening for being only 10 years old. He then continues, saying that the young man crushed Lord Roderick's third son during the event. His friend smiles and says that this is a refreshing story because the main family has been oppressing them for a long time. While training, the young man thinks that he showed his strength and presence enough at the sword dance assembly. He believes this will silence the voices that mock the Viscount's house and call them a disgrace. But the young man knows that his real target is still the Elmheim family itself and his former father. That's why he wanted to test how far his power could go in that duel against Dallas in the hall. A memory of the fight against the Lord comes to his mind as he continues his intense training. With a determined look, the protagonist knows that at his current level, he cannot defeat Roderick. He thinks that the wing crest is just a measure of latent magical power, and he can't use all 7 yet. The boy knows that being born with the power is useless if he can't use it, calling it wasted potential. With a swift move, the young man continues his training and charges at his opponent with the sword. His eyes glow with an intense gold as he concentrates fully on the fight against the knight. With a precise blow, the protagonist breaks the man's sword and yells, asking who's next. All the other knights are already on the ground, completely defeated by the young man. Suddenly, a voice questions if he's up to no good again while watching the scene from afar. Then his sister Alphen appears and says he has no limits, but that their father is calling for him. The young man agrees and starts walking towards her, passing by the fallen knights on the ground. At that, the young man notices the clothes the girl is wearing and seems quite surprised by her choice. The young woman then turns to him and asks what's wrong with a curious expression on her face. He comments that it's a rare sight and asks if she didn't hate wearing that type of clothing before. But the young woman replies that everything needs balance and that he inspired her not to stay as she was. The protagonist is a bit confused by his sister's answer and doesn't understand what she meant. With a smile, she takes his training sword and says that when she gets back, he will spend a lot of time with her. The young man smiles at the girl's attitude, seeming happy with his older sister's determination. He then jokes and asks her to go easy on him in their next training session together. Sometime later, the boy knocks on the door of his adoptive father's office to answer the call. Excusing himself, he enters the room and finds the Viscount sitting at his desk, looking very serious. The young man then asks what the man needs, and he just tells the boy to sit down for a talk. Sitting on the sofa, the protagonist awaits his father's words with a calm expression on his face. The older man begins by saying that 10 years have passed since they welcomed him into the family. He continues and says he thought about waiting until the boy was a little older for this. At that, the Viscount places a ring on the table, and the boy asks what it is, shocked. The man then reveals that the ring is proof of the next head of the Viscount's house. With a serious look, he says he wants Astor to succeed him, leaving the young man with shining eyes. The Viscount explains that their house is in a very delicate position, and the young man already knows this. He continues, saying that even though they are a branch of the Elman family, they have their own territory to protect. With a serious look, the man says they can't leave the seat of the next head vacant forever. The young man then asks if his sisters agree with this sudden decision from their father. The older man replies that he will tell everyone at the Night Academy where he will find his sisters. The young man remembers his other sisters, Manhwa and Kudo, and questions if they will also know the news. In his thoughts, the boy smiles and says they wouldn't be happy about it, especially Kudo. The adoptive father then explains that she dislikes him just for being born a boy with 7 wings. With that, the protagonist stands up and refuses the offer to become the next head of the family. He says he can't control his magic and almost hurt his own sister for being too immature. The black-haired young man states that nothing can convince an angry sister and that he's not ready. The older man just observes his son's attitude with a calm and thoughtful expression on his face. He then comments that the young man always made him doubt if he was really just an ordinary child. With a smile, the Viscount says he thought of the ring as a reward for the assembly and opens a box. But he continues and says that it seems the boy will prefer what's inside that box. The boy's eyes widen in surprise upon seeing the box's contents, and he wonders what it is. The older man then reveals that it is the magic sword Graham, a treasure of his family. This is the devouring magic blade, the only weapon capable of controlling the power of the 7 wings. The Viscount then takes the young man to a forest and says that this place should work for what he plans. The young man asks why they didn't go to the training hall, and the older man says it's a precaution. He then remembers that his adopted son has a habit of breaking things during his training. The man explains that the sword Graham is a famous blade passed down only to the eldest son of the family. With an intense glow, the sword seems to be activated in the older man's hands with immense power. The protagonist is completely shocked upon seeing the scene, not understanding what is happening. The boy then notices that the weapon has no blade and wonders if it's really a sword. But his adoptive father infuses it with magical power, and a blade of red energy emerges from the hilt. He then explains that the weapon is a blade of potential, completed by the power of its wielder. At that, a powerful attack of red energy surges forward, destroying everything in its path in the forest. The blow is so strong that it creates a vortex of air and dust, showing the immense power of the magic sword. The man warns that with mediocre power, the user can be drained by the blade, and that it has a history. With a serious look, he then offers the sword to the young man and asks if he wants to try using it. Without thinking, the young man grabs the sword's hilt with both hands, ready to test his own power. A golden aura envelopes him as he concentrates his mana into the weapon to create his own blade. The golden energy then explodes with immense force, and the boy seems to struggle to control it. He then realizes that his mana is flowing into the sword on its own, without his command. Suddenly, a huge beam of light shoots up into the sky, and one of the knights in the courtyard notices the flash. One of them asks if a comet fell, but his friend says it was the opposite, and something flew into the sky. His sister also observes the scene, and one of the men asks the other what he means by that. His sister then looks at the sky and says that it is definitely the protagonist's work. At that, the young man holds the sword with a smile and says that it is extraordinary, but his adoptive father corrects him, saying that it's not the sword that is extraordinary. He then points to the sky and states that the boy's power is what's impressive. The man explains that there has never been anyone with the 7 wings crest in the entire lineage. He believes that when the young man masters his power, he will surpass even Lord Roderick. At that, the Viscount thinks that his adopted son will be stronger than both him and his brother. However, he warns that such great power always ends up generating a lot of conflict. The man continues and says that if they find out the boy has 7 wings, it will be a problem. He then explains that everyone would be envious or even resentful of the young man. He warns that some will exploit him and others will try to eliminate him for being a threat, so that the young man doesn't regret being weak. The man extends his hand to him. With a serious look, he asks the young man to get strong while he can still train. The protagonist shakes his hand and vows that he will no longer live a miserable life. With determination, he thanks his father and promises to master the 7 wings and the sword. 3 days pass, and the Viscount's family welcomes someone home with open arms. Then 2 young women arrive, and the red-haired one dramatically announces her return. With an exaggerated pose, the girl seems very happy to finally be back. She then opens her arms and asks for a reunion hug from her younger sisters. But the girls run to hug the white-haired woman, calling her sister Manhwa. The red-haired young woman is left with her arms open and asks why no one is hugging her. One of the little ones then complains that her sister always messes up their hair carelessly. Embarrassed, the redhead denies everything and says she would never do such a thing to her sisters. Suddenly, she turns and finds Alphen standing near the stairs, watching the scene. Without a second thought, Kudo runs and gives the other girl a very tight hug. The pink-haired girl complains as her sister squeezes her very tightly without letting go. Seeing the scene, the white-haired young woman asks her father where Brother Aster is. The Viscount then begins to answer his daughter's question with a calm smile. With a serious look, Kudo turns upon hearing the mention of her adopted brother's name. Meanwhile, the young man is training and unleashes an explosion of red energy in the forest. The protagonist then dodges his own power, which seems to be out of control. Panting and in a cold sweat, he realizes he still can't master the magic sword. He thinks he can create the blade, but he's at his limit, just keeping it stable. Amidst the destruction, the young man wonders what he must do to be like his father. Suddenly, a voice says he's outdone himself, and Kudo appears, walking towards him. The young man asks if she's back already, and the redhead complains that he didn't even come to welcome her home. With a mocking smile, the girl calls him cold for not coming to meet her. She then accuses him of thinking he's special and says she heard about the sword assembly. But the young man replies that the same goes for her and her missions as a knight apprentice. He finishes by saying that she was the only one to receive the honorary Knight Medal of the Year. The red-haired girl says that if she couldn't even achieve that, she could never succeed her father. She then questions if he refused the offer of successor because of her. The young man thinks that his father caused trouble and says that wasn't his intention. He just explains that he didn't feel worthy of taking on such a responsibility yet. The redhead then turns and starts walking away, talking about her father and brother. She accuses him of being mean for knowing what her dream is and still acting that way. The black-haired young man is completely confused by his sister's reaction. Suddenly, the girl attacks with her sword, releasing a slash of energy in his direction. The attack cuts through the air and rushes forward, destroying a tree in its path. The young man is startled and narrowly dodges as the tree trunk explodes. Angrily, he asks why she suddenly attacked him like that, without warning. The redhead just replies that since it's been a while, she was going to test his skills. With a confident smile, the girl warns that next time she'll attack with everything, she's got. The protagonist tries to argue, saying his sword is still incomplete, but she questions if he would give the same excuse to an enemy on the battlefield. The black-haired young man is surprised by the question and wonders about the enemy. She says a knight must always be ready, and that if he hesitates, she will crush him. The girl charges again, and the young man thinks she must be kidding him. He thinks he's already at his limit, just trying to control his unstable magical power. But he understands he has no choice and releases his energy if his sister is serious. Then the two siblings' swords clash, and the boy despairs, thinking she is really going to take him down.